Nintendo is a name known by millions, loved by millions, and somehow hated by the same millions. And for good reason, I believe. They have a lot of merits to them, otherwise, they wouldn't have some of the best selling consoles and video games under their belt, but they also have a lot of demerits to them, one of which include being a typical Japanese company. Not my words, okay, those are my words, but that's the general consensus I get from a lot of long-time Nintendo fans and a few select communities that have any of their games as esports. But I wouldn't really know, as I've never actually owned any Nintendo products, and the only game that I remember playing is Wii Sports at a friend's house. That's my only legal experience with it, but I do know that they're home to some of the most beloved franchises in all of video gaming. And I kinda wanna experience that, but I sure as heck am not getting a Switch anytime soon. So, being the cheapskate I am, I scurried all over the internet to try and find a few games that resemble a lot of well-known Nintendo titles. Now, let's make this a little bit more interesting. I am now the newly appointed CEO of a new gaming company, Bintendo. Bintendo is releasing their first console, the Bintendo Female Dog, the Bintendo Beach, the Bintendo Ocean. I don't know, something that sounds cool. And I've been tasked with finding a few select games that I can have with the console in order to rival big names such as, okay, let's not kid ourselves, but something along the lines of that. So, with that being said, here are a few titles that closely resemble a lot of classic Nintendo games. So let's start with essentially the mascot of Nintendo, Super Mario. Now again, I have to preface that I barely have any experience with any Nintendo games legally, but from what I do know about Super Mario as a franchise is that I couldn't possibly do the entire series justice with any of the recommendations I make. But before I make any solid mentions, let's get the blatant clones out of the way, cause there's a lot of them. I played a bunch of these to see if any of them were any good, and there's not much I can say. I can't tell you the number of times I've played this opening level. However, a few do try and do different things from the second level onwards, but I can't really say much since I didn't really go past the third level for any of them. But what makes a Mario game a Mario game? Based on my very limited knowledge, I've gathered that a good Mario game usually ticks all three of these boxes. First of all, the games are platformers. I think that part's pretty easy. Second of all, Mario is always trying to rescue someone, usually Princess Peach. And third of all, the games are usually really fun to speedrun, cause I've watched a Summoning Salt video or two. And I think I got it. Super Meat Boy. The game ticks all the boxes. It literally ranks you on how fast you finish a level. Super Meat Boy is always trying to rescue his girlfriend, and also it's an incredibly brutal platformer. Good game, but it's not easy. It's also not free, but that's where Mad Dex comes in. Because Mad Dex is basically the same game except the main character has a hat. I actually quite like Mad Dex. I thought because it was a Super Meat Boy clone that it would do what all the other Mario clones were doing to the original Mario game. But it wasn't like that. From the get-go with the tutorial, the levels are actually quite different. And also, Mad Dex actually introduces two new mechanics that I don't remember seeing in Super Meat Boy that make for the most fun and intense set pieces I've seen in any mobile game in a while.
This is easy. Easy. This is easy. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Very simple. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Oh, we hit the key. Okay, we. Yeah, I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm finished. I'm not. I'm alive. This is easy. Yep. Yeah. Easy.
It's not as long as Super Meat Boy, and I definitely can't say it's better. However, it is free and it is fun, and that's good enough reason for me. But I'm not really satisfied with this title. Mad Dex is still sort of a Super Meat Boy clone, and Nintendo wants something a little bit more unique. Enter Robot Wants Kitty. Now I know that sounds a bit strange, but the game is exactly what it is. The robot wants the kitty. And the game's really good. Okay, so get this. You start the level and you can only move left or right.
What?
And through this, you seek power-ups like jumping and zooming, and you encounter enemies and you obtain weapons to be able to shoot the enemies, and there's also items that you gotta find in order to open up new areas in the map, and then there's also power-ups that you can have in order to increase your health. There's also brick walls that you gotta break, and you have to bring joy to these sad computers. Eventually, you'll be this overpowered plethora who flies through the entire map, shooting explosions, fighting bosses, and also making these computers happy. This game also surprisingly ticks all of the boxes as well. It's obviously a platformer. The robot is always trying to get to the kitty, and while the game is not permadeath, it still has a timer. And dying adds seconds to the time that you have, but there are also power-ups that can also shave off a few seconds. So I think that can make for some cool and unique speedrunning formulas. I absolutely adore this game, and apparently it was a Flash game that made its way to mobile stores eventually, and I'm glad they brought it over. If I wanted a mascot for Bintendo the same way Nintendo has Mario, I would definitely want Robot to be our mascot. Up next is Nintendo's poster child, The Legend of Zelda. From what I'm aware of, The Legend of Zelda is about some guy who is not named Zelda, who sort of just wears a lot of green and fights stuff. Okay, that's not a good description, but I really want to play these games and I try my best not to spoil myself for any of them. It's actually really difficult finding a free game that is like Zelda, so I'm gonna bend the rules slightly for this one. Oceanhorn is not free. However, I'm told it's inspired by Wind Waker, if I'm not mistaken. Plus, it has a free version which essentially takes you through the entire first level, and it's kinda cool. If you have enough cash to spare, but not enough cash for a Switch, you can definitely try it out. However, that's not the point of this video, and I do actually have a free game that I think is very reminiscent of Zelda. Swordago is good. It's a game much like Oceanhorn, where the main character sort of just wakes up. They tell him he has to go find a sword and save the world. Cool, but this game surprisingly has a lot for a free game. It doesn't really look the best, and there is no RPG elements. I actually have no idea if that's in Zelda or not. Maybe I should have done a little bit more research. But the story is really easy to follow. The variety of enemies, and I mean variety of enemies, make it a decent challenge, sometimes near impossible, and other times just flat out annoying.
Why it's so well hidden?
There's a lot of secret areas, some of which are so satisfying to find. The level design is pretty good. It's really good. They've got a few puzzles that tickle your brain from time to time, and also there's a few intense platforming obstacles. The music is quite whimsical and very appropriate for the most part, and the boss fights are pretty alright, but they do get much easier once you figure them out. However, the game is not perfect, and I'll try my best not to turn this into a fully fledged review, I promise. As soon as I exit an area, no matter the case, the game usually resets that area and respawns most of all the enemies, with the exception of a few mini bosses. And for the most part, that's alright. Items are very expensive in this game and they do call for a grind. Now, in scenarios where I am fighting a mini boss and I get involuntarily yeeted off the screen,
No.
I do not want to come back to the sky having full health. Nonetheless, the game is really good. It's free, and as a result, I genuinely have nothing to actually complain about. So I would love to have this as my Zelda-like game for Bintendo. Also, Genshin Impact. I didn't want to recommend this game since I have not played it yet, but everyone and their mother has already played this game. I kind of want to dodge a bullet by, actually recommending it, because it is free and it is surprisingly enough available on mobile. But why would I ever recommend a game to someone who's probably already playing it? Metroidvania. Now, finding a good free Metroidvania game was almost impossible, so I'm gonna cheat here a little again. Essentially, Metroidvania is a genre of games that was first seen in two titles, Metroid and Castlevania, hence the amalgamation of the name. It's a genre of game where it's usually 2D and the player has an interconnected world where they have to get special items or power-ups in order to access new areas in the world map. This is all required to progress, and it kinda gives it a sense of a bit of an open world. And I've kind of already recommended a title that is much like that. Robot Wants Kitty. Granted, Robot Wants Kitty is less of a Metroidvania than most others, but it definitely does have that Metroidvania element. The robot is constantly going around the map trying to find certain things in order to open up new areas in the map. The levels are much shorter, obviously, and Robot Wants Kitty doesn't really have a fleshed out story, so it is a bit of a bare bones recommendation, but I do have something that is definitely considered a Metroidvania. Swordigo. It has these portals that take you to certain areas of the map that you've already gone to. Plus, areas that you weren't able to go through earlier, you can get certain power-ups or items that allow you to do that later on. If that isn't a Metroidvania, I certainly don't know what Metroidvanias are. Alright, I'll stop cheesing it. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this section. Ailment. It's a space-themed game, much like Metroid itself. It's literally about shooting zombies in a spaceship. What more would you want? You have a number of guns to choose from, and the story is told in a bit of an unraveling narrative, with the MC sort of saying stuff as he gets to certain points of the map. This is mostly because he has his memory erased, or he simply has a bit of amnesia, but he's constantly trying to piece together what happened as he progresses through the ship. And to progress further, one needs to activate a few computers to access locked doors. So although it's not that complex, it's still a Metroidvania at heart. The combat's quite fun because it kind of starts like, oh, I'm shooting zombies, that's cute, to I didn't know I was playing a bullet hell. The difficulty curve is insane, so prepare yourself. Or because it's free to play, make use of the ad rewards. There's a sequel or a prequel of the game from the same creator too, called Endurance. And so far from what I've played, it seems like what a sequel of the game usually is. The same game with a few improvements and differences and kinda expanding on the story a little bit. So I'd be more than happy to have Ailment and Endurance as our Metroidvanias for Bintendo. Animal Crossing blew up in 2020. I barely knew of its existence before then. From what I know, it's about starting a new life on an island and doing stuff. That sounds very vague, but to be fair, there is a lot that you can do in that game. Every stream I've tuned into, the character is either fishing, catching butterflies or bugs, talking to villagers, chopping trees. It's very open-ended. So if I, the CEO of Bintendo, was a smart businessman, I would just get the entirety of Poom Games. They have an arsenal of games with millions of downloads, including Animal Camp and Cat Forest being two of them. Those are our Animal Crossing-like games. Honestly, it's weird. I started both games, but they were quite similar, so I subconsciously progressed with Animal Camp. It's the same general concept as Animal Crossing, I believe. The MC heads over to an island to start over and accomplishes basically building an entire city on the island. You can gather materials that continuously grow on the island to build little cabins that cute little animals that visit the island can stay in. And that's how you earn pine cones, the in-game currency, so you can then buy more stuff to make your island even nicer and earn even more money. Very simple, very chill, and it's quite cute. But what about the fishing? Based on what I've seen of Animal Crossing streams, fishing is the greatest activity since slicing bread. Okay, I didn't use that analogy correctly, but I'm not really good at that kind of stuff. But the fishing in Animal Camp is horrendously tedious. It takes like 180 seconds. 180 seconds for fishing. The worst part about this is that your character cannot do anything during this time, since the game works on a time and energy system, unless you have another employee or you cancel the entire thing and forfeit the energy that you used. However, I unfortunately find it quite difficult to keep coming back to this game. When I did open it, I usually did spend quite a while on it, but I thought that because it's not pulling me back, these kinds of games aren't really for me. That is until Happy Street had me addicted. From the very first moment, I had no idea I'd be opening this game nearly every day since download. The gist of the game boils down to our MC, who is a little fox, descending from the skies on a hot air balloon. He lands on a field and meets a wolf who loves his money, Pippin, and Pippin helps him to fix up the area to build shops for necessities and accessories. Now Billy, who is our main character, I remembered his name now, also builds cottages in order to house the different types of villagers. More friends keep popping up all over the place to give him quests, rewards, and general help. I was actually quite surprised by how much this game had content-wise for the 2D side-scrolling format that it uses. There's a lot of customization and upgrading that applies to both the buildings and a lot of your villages. The game is also cute, and I'm also guilty of being weak to a lot of the humor.
Okay.
By the time of recording, this was my most played game out of all of the games, with about 40 plus hours. So it was clear that I liked this game a little bit more than Animal Camp. But why is that? Cat Forest has way more downloads than Happy Street, and it's essentially the same game as Animal Camp. The answer, other than the other things that I've already stated, the reason is actually a lot simpler. I'm a hoarder. Yes, I am the type of person who walked a lot in Skyrim.
Whiterun is not that far.
I usually make a lot more money than I need and collect and craft twice as many items for quests in case I need them later. Doing this in Animal Camp wasn't really that great, but doing this in Happy Street was actually quite fun. There's a number of different ways to make money in this game, from obviously the shops and doing quests and also selling stuff, to making the bird poop on people's head and a few mini games, and also the fiesta, which is essentially how do I describe it? The village climax, where all the villagers just frantically spend money all over the place. And because of that, I've always tried to optimize my street in order to make as much money as I can. Also, the fishing is also surprisingly engaging. There's a number of factors involved, such as how you place your bob, the timing of your pulls, what time of day it is. There's some fish that you can't catch during the day, and also you can rotate your phone to shift the bob. Also, Animal Crossing is known for its memorable characters, and honestly, out of all of these games, Happy Street does a pretty good job in emulating that. I mean, okay, the game is not perfect. One really bad thing I hate about it is the time it takes to do certain things, to craft and also upgrade your buildings. I mean, to be fair, this kind of game isn't really a game you spend hours and hours on. You can, but it's not really built like that. It's meant to be a type of game that you check every so often. However, Animal Camp is kind of the opposite. You can spend a lot of hours in that game. So both these games are really good in their own way. Alright, we're down to the two final games, and you'd recognize that totals up to about 6 sections, and I kind of wanted 5 already, and I still kind of do have 5 because the last game is sort of a bonus recommendation more than anything. And also, I had to mention these 2 lost games because they're basically the reason I'm doing this entire video in the first place. Alright, so you know how Fortnite is busy acquiring a bunch of big IPs and putting them in their game, and how entire fandoms are really sad about the fact that a bunch of kids are gonna be looking at certain anime or games or movies and say stuff like, "Oh hey, it's the Fortnite guy." Yeah. So a few years ago, a younger Guads played 2 really fun games. Now, soon after playing those games quite a while, he found himself watching Jinx Esports TV, and he saw a game that looked familiar to one of the games he was playing. He looked at the screen and he said, "Hey, that looks like Beach Buggy Racing." It was to Guads' detriment that Mario Kart did not look like Beach Buggy Racing. Beach Buggy Racing looked like Mario Kart. And although Mario Kart isn't the first ever kart racer, it certainly is the most popular. And it makes sense. It takes some of the most popular characters from the Mario universe and makes them race on Mario-themed game tracks with wacky power-ups that make everything unpredictable and unfair. And Beach Buggy Racing does most of this. It's a simple beach-themed kart racer with a ton of really cool maps and plenty of randomized power-ups that can help you or severely hinder your opponents, and also vice versa. The way it works is that you race against a bunch of computers in a series type of format. Now, all of the races that are grouped in each of these series are progressively harder, and you can get a max of 3 stars per race for essentially first place. There's a certain amount of stars you need to unlock each progressive race, and there's also other challenges in the series. You can also earn gold for amping up your car for the harder races and challenges, but unfortunately the only form of multiplayer is split screen, which doesn't really work unless you have a controller. There is no online, but there is a Beach Buggy Racing 2 which is available on 4 platforms I think, including the Switch, which is kinda hilarious to me. I haven't looked onto it yet, but hopefully Beach Buggy Racing 2 has a multiplayer, so it can at least rival Mario Kart as a party game, because I feel like that is the selling point of that game. I also need to remind you that the game works with a ticket energy system, which if you're good, doesn't really matter, since every race you finish first in, it refunds you the ticket, and if you beat a boss in a series, you get all of your tickets back. So you can play for hours on end. Plus, if you get salty, you can also restart just like me, and it doesn't really forfeit your ticket for doing that since you haven't gotten the rewards yet. I like this game. I recently started playing it again, and it's really fun because, well, that randomized element does add a lot to the game. And also now I can call my console the Bintendo Beach and it would be on theme. Hey, isn't that Brawlhalla? Brawlhalla is a fun game, so I can't even begin to imagine how fun Smash is. I felt it appropriate to make this game part 2 of this final section because, much like the Mario Kart series, the Super Smash Bros. Games make use of characters from many of the games that were available on the Nintendo consoles. So Smash is a fighting game, which isn't that uncommon. However, what makes it one of the most beloved ones is its unique take to the fighting game genre. Now, Brawlhalla uses much of the same mechanics as Smash. Characters on floating platforms hit each other in order to lower the opponent's health and also deplatform them. The lower the opponent's health, the further that you can hit them. Now, the unique thing about Brawlhalla, I suppose, is how each character has their own set of weapons that they can obtain from at least one of the many items that randomly spawn across the platforms. The weapons can range from bows to lances to guns to swords and a few more, so there's great variety. Now, Smash players get so hyped for their character announcements. But the crossovers that Brawlhalla has had are wild. I'm skimming through this list right now and we've got like Shovel Knight, Adventure Time, The Walking Dead, TMNT, Kung Fu Panda, Ben 10, Steven Universe, and the WWE. The WWE. You can play as John Cena. In an ideal world, this would mean that Bintendo would have many of these IPs as exclusives to the Bintendo Ocean or whatever. Man, I feel like I'm taking this Bintendo thing a little bit too far. This game is a lot of fun and can get rather intense, and while it's not Smash esports level of intense because, wow, I can't even tell what's happening here, I still feel like Brawlhalla has a lot to offer in the form of a variety of game modes. These are really cool. Yeah, look at them. Wow. I can't really name any of them off the top of my head since I haven't played this game in a while. Now, I've only ever played Brawlhalla on PC, so I was shocked to find that it's actually also available on mobile. So go ahead and check it out if you haven't. Now, even though Nintendo is giving the Smash community a hard time and sometimes the bad apples of the community give itself a hard name, I can see why the Super Smash Bros. Series is such a beloved franchise. But I feel like Brawlhalla is more than a great alternative for someone who can't or won't get their hands on a Switch and Smash. So that does it for my list of Nintendo-like games that are available free on mobile. There were a lot of games all over the internet, but it was kind of hard to gauge which ones were the best ones, so I may have missed a few games or two. So if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I am so sorry that the quality of the video just kept on deteriorating the closer we got to the end. This video took so long. Managing a multimedia project is a pain. I've already started 3 this year, and I've already cancelled 2, and I'm still working on the 3rd one. It was a little bit discouraging at first to find that I really have trouble managing these kinds of projects, so I was really determined to actually finish this one. But yeah, I'm not gonna do a video this long for a while. Every single aspect of this was hard. Playing the games was obviously the easiest part, but from the editing all the way down to the research, all the way down to the script writing, which, who knew script writing was an actual skill? Okay, I knew that. However, my mistake was in thinking that I was actually relatively good at it. Anyway, I know that I have a lot to improve upon, and if you have suggestions on how I can improve my content for the future, please do leave them down below. Anyway, let me not make this any longer. Thank you for watching.